On December 9th, 1983, Brian De Palma's Scarface was unleashed upon the movie-going public, propelled by a ferocious lead performance from Al Pacino. Ambitious, lurid, and jaw-droppingly excessive, Scarface only saw meager returns in that first run, but what a life it's had since. This blood-soaked rags-to-riches story, which followed a Cuban immigrant who schemes his way to the top of the cocaine ladder, became much more than what Pauline Kael famously criticized as an allegory of impotence. It became a kind of code for inner-city youth, a staple in modern hip-hop, and in short, the biggest film to strike the pop culture nerve since The Godfather and Star Wars. Our first guest tonight examines this phenomenon in his intoxicating new book, Scarface Nation. Ken Tucker is editor-at-large and TV critic for Entertainment Weekly. He has won 2 national magazine awards, and he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Criticism. He's also a frequent contributor to NPR's Fresh Air with Terry Gross. In Scarface Nation, he dissects the origins of Scarface, from the 1930 novel to the 1932 Howard Hawks film to De Palma's volcanic production. Along the way, the movie geek will treasure insightful bits of trivia, in-depth interviews with talents like screenwriter Oliver Stone, and countless examples of how the film has infiltrated the culture. This is a highly pleasurable read, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Ken Tucker to Movie Geeks United.
All right, let me patch him through.
Mr. Tucker?
Hello, I have goosebumps.
That makes 3 of us. Okay, excellent.
Well, we aim to please. We both read your book, and it was sensational. I mean, I couldn't put it down. It was a great read.
Well, thanks.
And let me know, first of all, why you chose this subject. What about this?
It kind of chose me. One of the editors, the editor-in-chief at St. Martin's Press, came back after one weekend, and he said, my teenage son and his friends have spent the entire weekend watching Scarface, and I'm convinced that there's a book about this. And I said, really? I said, there's a 2-DVD set, and I don't know if there's a book. And they said, no, just think about it. And then I looked at the movie again. I started thinking, I just kind of went on the internet, and I just started to realize how much life this thing has had over the past 25 years and how it just remains so vital in the culture in so many different ways. And it began to be a real joy and challenge to, as you said in your introduction, to not just talk about the De Palma film, but to look again at the Howard Hawks Paul Muni version and to read the original pulp novel source Scarface book by this guy Armitage Trail was his pen name.
That's right.
It was fascinating to me.
So for you, what was the value of that? What was the value of going back to that original film and earlier to that novel?
Well, it certainly laid everything out in a way that almost made the Scarface story take on, to me, the resonance of a myth, a great American myth. It's one version of the American success story about how one man can bring himself up by his bootstraps. When I was doing a lot of interviews for this, one thing that a lot of people in the hip-hop community said that they thought that Scarface differentiated itself from a lot of other gangster movies in the sense that when they looked at the Godfather movies, they said, it's always all about family and groups of people and gangs. And for Scarface, it was one man alone coming up, and that had tremendous cultural and sociological resonance for them. And I think that's true. That's something that the screenwriter Oliver Stone and De Palma keyed in on and emphasized in the movie.
Right. Well, and it was a street thug. I mean, and it wasn't an Italian American. It set itself apart in many ways.
That's right. I mean,
the epitome of greed. I mean, the epitome of greed at the beginning of the greedy '80s.
It's like after Scarface, Oliver Stone would go on to write Wall Street with Greed is Good, but all the seeds to that were really laid down in the catchphrases that everybody knows from Scarface. Never underestimate the other guy's greed. Don't get high on your own supply. All those kind of phrases. And you also, as you just said earlier, the crucial move that the modern movie made was moving this gangster from Chicago, where originally he had been a thinly disguised version of Al Capone, and moving that to Miami and the person who did that originally was Sidney Lumet's idea to do that. He was originally attached to direct the movie, and he thought in the 80s the idea, well, bootlegging in Chicago, that idea was outmoded, but the the Colombian drug trade in the mid 80s was thriving, and so he wanted to make a very political movie set in Miami, and so that was kind of when De Palma became attached to the movie. That decision had been made by Lumet and the producer Martin Bregman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what a different film that would have been under Lumet's wing. I don't think we'd be talking about it with the same kind of the same kind of awe that we have today of this movie's success.
I think you're right. I mean, Lumet, made a lot of terrific films. He made some terrific films with Pacino, but at the same time, he didn't have that kind of go-for-your-throat operatic technique that De Palma brought to it. I mean, I say in the book this is a kind of mongrel creation. It's not really an auteur piece. It's very much the work of kind of what I say in the book is kind of four middle-aged white guys who created something that they had no idea would have such resonance with Black and Latino culture. Producer Bregman, De Palma, Pacino, and Oliver Stone.
Right. And they really don't. The big fascination that I have with Scarface, and I'm sure it was the case with you too, and what you cover most of all in your book, they really had no idea, and they still don't quite, why this movie has caught on as it has.
No.
What are your theories on that?
Well, I mean, this thing was kind of conceived as a sort of big-budget exploitation film, and everybody sort of had their own motives for doing it. De Palma hadn't had a really big commercial success since Carrie at that point. Oliver Stone was kind of looking for a hit. He had done The Hand, and they all had their own kind of motives for that. But the resonance for the film, it's like I talked to everybody except Pacino for this, and they were just clueless as to how this thing caught on, and I think it's partly because by the mid '80s movies could open and stay in theaters for a while. It wasn't like the DVD age now, and so I think it didn't do great business when it first opened up the first week in December in 1983. It did moderate. It was good, but it stayed in theaters for a while, and it began to develop this kind of almost Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of following, where people would yell lines back at the screen, and I think it touched a nerve. Certainly, Stone's script, as we talked about, a guy bringing himself up from nothing, coming into this country as part of the Mariel boat lift. Everything kind of based on fact, yet taking that leap into the myth of the gangster, that, the back to the 30s, the classic Warner Brothers kind of gangster pictures, melding that to the reality with the myth, really, when you combine it with the technique that De Palma was able to bring to it, I think really it was a phenomenon.
Yeah, and in terms of the crafting of this film, you talk about how De Palma was essentially a director for hire on this project. But also how he, and this is hard to imagine, how he took an Oliver Stone script and he made it even more over the top. and Stone talks about this, about his conception of it, and how De Palma kind of accentuated that to an operatic level.
Yeah,
but he's so good at that, though.
Yeah.
Well,
well, I mean, Stone said to me when he first saw the chainsaw scene, he said, "It's too long. It's too slow. He takes so long to get there." And then he stopped and he kind of chuckled to himself as he talked to me, and he said, "But I got to hand it to Brian. He really knew what he was doing. He pursued his vision, and I really respect him for that." And it's almost as if, it's kind of like your baby, I imagine. And at the time there was a lot of anger that Stone had, that he freely admitted. He'd written this kind of famous memo to Bregman and to the studio, saying how De Palma had ruined his script, he felt at the time, and he doesn't feel that way today. But certainly both De Palma and Pacino looked upon this material as something more than just a gangster movie. I mean, Pacino's been widely quoted as saying, that he was reading a lot of Bertolt Brecht, and he wanted to make this character. He intentionally made it two-dimensional, not three-dimensional. That he wanted to heighten the kind of exaggeration of this character, and De Palma was completely on the same page with that, and he structured it, even though it's 2.5 hours long. He structures it like a B-movie action director structures a film, in the sense that he said, every 30 minutes you have to have an explosive action scene, and if you watch it, that's what happens. Every half hour, something big happens in the movie. Yet at the same time, he has this languid pace that accounts for the length of it, that kind of really moves you along in this way that it becomes a saga as opposed to just an exploitation film with a big budget.
Right. And it's really, I found a perfect marriage, Stone's voice and De Palma's visual prowess, because the thing that you remember about all De Palma films, obviously, are the sequences. You and we're crazy about De Palma on the show. You don't really commit to memory much of the dialogue. He's almost best with he doesn't have to deal with the dialogue. So you remember the last gunfight. You remember that chainsaw scene because it's a sequence. But you also have Stone's dialogue. You remember the restaurant scene, and it's so often quoted. So Oliver Stone now is very happy with the end product. Does he have any regrets now about anything in the film?
It certainly didn't sound that way to me. I mean, he really appreciated the fact that, he was proud that all those phrases did become catchphrases, that essentially all those kind of crucial speeches. He said that the speech in the restaurant scene was actually longer, but, now it's all, you watch it and you think, that's absolutely perfect. It's that whole kind of Pacino, stoned to the gills as Tony Montana, standing up in this crowded restaurant filled with all these posh customers, saying, you need guys like me. Say goodnight to the bad guy. It's just a great moment. And as you say, there are so many De Palma movies that you remember for these beautiful, artfully constructed tracking shots and things like that he certainly put into Scarface, but also there's that kind of fierce back and forth dialogue that is both kind of classic gangster movie dialogue and is over-the-top Oliver Stone dialogue.
Yeah. I'm wondering about when you first saw Scarface and what your thoughts were and how those feelings have evolved throughout the years.
Well, I first saw Scarface, I was probably just out of college or something, and at the time I thought, it's good, but it's not even my favorite De Palma movie. It's like, I liked Blowout better, I liked The Fury better.
Same here.
And so, to me, upon first coming to it, as I said, I had my reservations, but once I got involved in sort of the culture of Scarface, it's undeniable that it has the kind of resonance that no other De Palma movie has, the way it took root in hip-hop culture and the way it's quoted in so many television shows, from The Simpsons and Family Guy to Curb Your Enthusiasm to the very first episode of The Sopranos.
Absolutely.
There's just no other movie that has that. I would go on YouTube and find all these kind of homemade videos. I mentioned in the book there's a video of Dick Cheney at the 2004 Republican Convention.
Yeah, I know.
And instead of what he actually said, what's put in his mouth are the obscene speeches of Tony Montana. And they cut back and forth to the screaming mob of Republicans going crazy when, Dick Cheney kind of comes out of his mouth, this town is like a great big root waiting to get and everybody goes nuts, and it's just great. And one of the YouTube videos that I didn't make it into my book after it was finished, there's a YouTube video of John McCain's face superimposed onto Tony Montana's for the final shootout. So you have McCain with the machine gun blasting away, and the title of that YouTube video is called "Making McCain Interesting."
Oh, does that mean Sarah Palin is Elvira?
Yeah, I'm waiting for that one. Somebody's got to put that together fast.
Oh my God,
that's going to show up.
Yeah.
My favorite. I love it when they try to edit it for television, and that line you mentioned. They have Montana saying, "This is safe for the radio." You can curse on the show.
you
but this
can
is
curse
safe for the
as
radio.
much as you want, Ken.
Oh, great.
But
Okay, good.
on the TV, he says, "This town's like a great big chicken waiting to get plucked."
Right.
That was incredibly inventive.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
There are a couple of things that interest me here. I think it's a very good film. I know that it got critically
it grows
blasted.
on you. It grows
yeah,
on you. I mean, it just
but like
can't help.
anything that's very popular, like it is now, there's a backlash, and a lot of people are going back saying this isn't a really good film. I think it is a very good film. I'm interested though how it avoids camp. I mean, it's at such a placed at such a fever pitch. And there's so many laugh out loud kind of lines and moments in that film, and Pacino's completely appropriate, over the top performance. How do you think it avoids camp, or does it, in your mind?
Well, I think it's because when it was being made, nobody was winking when they made it. Pacino was, Stephen Bauer says that Pacino was very much method actor-ish. Bauer worked with him on the accent. He had another dialect coach worked with him on the accent, that he stayed in character as much as possible. De Palma, took it all very seriously. This was not going to be, certainly he wanted to make a real shoot 'em up, but it was not a winking, self-conscious, Quentin Tarantino-ish kind of homage. This was really going to, I think, in De Palma's mind, reinvent the gangster film at that point. And I also think they were catching a wave at a certain point where the disco music, all the nightclub scenes, that music really worked at the time. That Giorgio Moroder soundtrack, that's a great Moroder soundtrack. The use of Blondie. Since then, obviously, so many hip-hop artists have, suggested that they wanted to supply an alternate soundtrack to that, and Martin Bregman said, he thought it would be great to do, but De Palma has always vehemently opposed putting a new soundtrack on it, and I see his point, because it would take it out of being a period piece. I mean, what I would like to see is, a DVD release that had that as an alternate soundtrack, so you could play both versions.
Right. But you bring up the hip hop kind of generation and how they've embraced this film, and this is something that you deal with extensively in your book, and it's a little bit of a gray area. When they attach themselves to this film as they have, and many people, not just of the hip hop generation, but are they getting the right message from it, and is the right message actually in the film?
Yeah, I think that, it's one of those things that there is a certain code of honor that is admirable on some level to Tony Montana. On another level, I find him to be a very amoral character. And so, when I talked to Snoop Dogg and he said, this is a blueprint for black businessmen, that he and many, many people that he knew took this as a way to conduct your business. And in the sense that there are a lot of those entrepreneurs who, didn't go to Harvard Business School and had to kind of make it up as they went along, the Tony Montana Code served them well up to a point. But, the kind of garishness, the sort of excessive spending of your wealth, the ostentatious bling, even that has kind of, over the past 25 years, I think, decreased in favor. So I think that, there are a lot of, I say in the book that I think there are a lot of young people who may not have committed certain criminal acts had they not had the example of Tony Montana. But on the other hand, there are a lot of young artists that I spoke to, whether they were hip-hop musicians or young actors or young directors, who said they would not have been making movies had they not seen Scarface. So, I think I subscribe to, in general, to the idea that movies and artists are not responsible for the behavior that they inspire. They're responsible for the things that they create. And once you set something loose out there in the world, people are going to interpret it the way they're going to interpret it, and you have no control over it. So
Sure.
I don't condemn it, but I try to point out that, there are certain limitations to following the Scarface Code.
Well, and this phenomenon is fascinating, and you go into it in detail. Everything from the music to the, Saddam Hussein, I learned from reading your book, was a fan. He named one of his companies.
Yeah.
Montana Enterprises.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? And but you also talk about the obviously the films that were inspired by Scarface. Among those films, which one do you think gets closest to genuinely getting that feel of Scarface?
Well, in a way, there was a movie that's not especially well known called Paid in Full, which is about a 2002 movie, which I think is a really interesting kind of B movie. And Wood Harris, one of the actors in that movie, in the voiceover, says things got really hot in Harlem when Scarface came to town. And it's about a black youth gang and about how people try to make the best they can in their situations. Wood Harris has got a little brother that he takes care of because his parents are dead, and the little kid brushes his teeth, and he puts his toothbrush in a cup. Then the cup says, "The world is yours." It's the Scarface motto on it. So there are a lot of these little homages to Scarface in a lot of films like that, and I think in a way, Paid in Full is one of the most interesting examples of that.
Paid in Full.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember on that one. There's also the scene in New Jack City where they're watching Scarface.
Yeah.
That was the first time I had actually seen, when I saw it, because it was in 1991, and that movie, and the impact, because the audience I saw it with just erupted in applause when that scene came on. So it just showed you. I mean, I love the film, but I didn't realize the impact was there. And this was in '91, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's also interesting is when we talk about Scarface, it's such a male movie that we tend to focus on Pacino and Bauer and De Palma and Stone, all those great personalities. But you talk, too, about the portrayal of women in the film, and you say that De Palma's portrayal of women is singular in Scarface among the remainder of his films. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, I think that the depiction of Elvira in the movie, Michelle Pfeiffer's character, that was a very strong woman in her own way. She's somebody who held Tony at bay for a long time and really controlled him in a way that a lot of De Palma heroines didn't. I mean, in Blowout and other movies, women are often kind of victims or are manipulated to a certain extent. Angie Dickinson,
Nancy Allen.
Yeah, and so I think both the Michelle Pfeiffer character and certainly the Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio character, his sister Gina, that's the kind of character that De Palma never had to deal with, and that was very important to the Scarface, both the Paul Muni Scarface and the original novel. All three of those, that character, the kind of quasi-incestuous relationship that the Scarface character has, is present in all forms of the Scarface myth. And that's the kind of character that De Palma had never had to grapple with. And also Miriam Colon's Mama Montana character, very strong maternal character, very disapproving of what her son did. Again, kind of unique, I think, in the De Palma canon.
Do you have a favorite moment in the film?
I think my favorite moment is when Tony turns on Robert Loggia's character Frank. I really like that when he's there with Manny, Stephen Bauer, and he's basically got him begging, and he says, "You're not going to shoot me, are you, Tony?" He said, "I'm not going to shoot you," and he turns to Stephen Bauer and says, "You shoot him." I just think that's a great. It's a great scene. That when Harris Yulin gets plugged in the gut, I just. I love the Harris Yulin character too. It's just a completely corrupt cop who gets it.
Yeah, there's little moments in the film that really get me, and it's surprising because when you first view it, you don't recognize the comedy in it, and the more you see it, it dawned on me, this is a funny movie at times. There's a little moment towards the end when he comes back to his mansion when he's trying to find Manny, and he has the really fat, heavyset henchman or bodyguard, and he wants the bodyguard to go to the office and try to call his mother or something, and he goes, go, 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 and he starts to smack him on the behind. There's just a little character moment that always makes me laugh. But the thing about Pacino in that film, knowing Pacino's work, because I'm insane about Pacino's work, and how deeply involved he is also with Shakespeare's Richard III, is how similar those characters are, and that they scheme and they murder their way to the top, but that only makes, once they get there, it only makes them more paranoid. They don't enjoy it. I think the only difference is Tony Montana refused to kill the two kids, and that was his undoing.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to Richard III. Do you think that the main reason, if you had to boil it down to one main reason why this movie has lasted as it has, would it be Pacino?
I think that Pacino's performance, along with this kind of, as you pointing out, it has the structure of a classical tragedy, and it has that sort of great classic structure combined with the fact that it was a real good, high, big budget B movie. So when you've got that technique of De Palma, Pacino working at the height of his powers, Oliver Stone, a very hungry Oliver Stone wanting to write a really memorable, resonant script, I think all that combined to make this a really great movie.
Yeah. This is a great book, and everyone out there listening live or on the archive, pick it up. If you click the icon there on the home page where you are right now, it'll take you directly to the Amazon page where you can purchase Scarface Nation. And Mr. Tucker, I just want to tell you that we read you all the time, and we enjoy your writing very much, and we appreciate it very much, your work.
Well, thank you so much. I listened to the show. I thought that tribute show you did to De Palma, I was literally writing the book. I was listening to that. So
thank you.
It's a great show.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've made my night. Thank you.
Yeah, really. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks.